These are some of the biggest miscarriages of justice in British history. A miscarriage of justice is when a person is convicted and punished for a crime they didn't commit.
It often is caused by mistakes or deliberate wrongdoing by the police or by the justice system, basically things like fabrication of evidence and unreliable confessions.
But the term often also gets used for wider high-profile scandals.
Stephen Downing was the victim of the longest miscarriage of justice in British history. In 1974, the 17-year-old was convicted of murdering Wendy Sewell in a cemetery in Bakewell.
Mr. Downing reportedly at the time had a reading age of 11.
He was interrogated for 9 hours by police before being made to sign a confession. He had his sentence overturned in 2001 after spending 27 years behind bars.
They never found the killer of Wendy Sewell.
In November 1974, 2 IRA bombs exploded in 2 pubs in Birmingham, killing 21 people.
The British government cracked down on the IRA in response and quickly arrested 6 Irish suspects.
4 of them signed confessions, even though the IRA declared they were not part of the group. The suspects said they confessed after being beaten by police, but they were all found guilty and given long prison sentences. Over the years, a campaign grew around the so-called Birmingham Six.
Demonstrations in 55 cities on 5 continents outside British embassies and consulates, taken up by President Gorbachev in meetings with Mrs. Thatcher. The international pressure has been enormous.
It was eventually found that the forensic evidence used to convict them was unreliable, and finally, in 1991, they were released.
The case was an example of police misconduct in dealing with IRA bombings, and it wasn't the only one.
Other famous groups who experienced similar miscarriages of justice include the Guildford Four and the Maguire Seven.
This is one of the most famous scandals in British history.
And while it is very different to the other cases here, it has been called the greatest miscarriage of justice of our times by Greater Manchester Mayor and former Labour MP Andy Burnham.
If they're going to level up this country, you need to level up ordinary citizens when they walk into a courtroom against the authorities of this country. At the moment, it's a massive mismatch.
In 1989, a crush at the Hillsborough Stadium during an FA Cup semi-final led to the deaths of 97 Liverpool fans. In the aftermath, the police blamed Liverpool fans for causing the disaster. But in 2016, after decades of fighting from families and survivors, it was found by an inquest jury that the victims were actually unlawfully killed and the fans weren't to blame. Instead, fault lay with the policing on the day.
Sally Clark was convicted of murdering her 2 baby sons in 1999.
She was found guilty for smothering her 11-week-old to death in 1996 and shaking her 8-week-old to death in 1998.
Mrs. Clark served 3 years of her life sentence, but she was cleared in 2003 after a second appeal.
Mrs. Clark had always claimed both children had died of sudden infant death syndrome, or SIDS. In the first trial, paediatrician Professor Sir Roy Meadow claimed 2 children dying of SIDS was a 1 in 73 million chance. That stat was later found to be misleading. It also emerged that Alan Williams, the forensic pathologist who examined both babies, failed to disclose results that suggested her second son died of natural causes. As a result of this case, the then Attorney General ordered a review into other cases, and 2 other women had their convictions overturned.
Mrs. Clark was found dead at her home from alcohol poisoning in 2007.
In 1999, TV presenter Jill Dando was killed outside her home in West London. The killing shocked the country and sparked a massive police investigation. In 2001, Barry George was convicted of her murder.
Well, we need to regroup, as I said in this.
But 7 years later, he was granted a retrial after his legal team disputed the forensic evidence used to convict him. This led to him being acquitted of Dando's murder.
The real killer has never been found. More than 700 sub-postmasters and sub-postmistresses were prosecuted between 1999 and 2015. They were accused of theft, fraud and false accounting. But it was a faulty computer software system called Horizon that was making it look like money was missing.
Many of the accused lost their jobs, faced court battles, went to prison, and some took their own lives. UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak called the scandal an appalling miscarriage of justice.
People who worked hard to serve their communities had their lives and their reputations destroyed through absolutely no fault of their own.
In 2023, an independent inquiry began to look into the scandal.
And then the story was dramatised on ITV, bringing the miscarriage of justice back to the spotlight. In early 2024, the Prime Minister said a new law will be introduced so people wrongly convicted in the Horizon scandal would be swiftly exonerated and compensated.